If you've ever curled up with a so-called scary book only to be disappointed by cliches and cheap thrills, this video is for you. Today I am sharing my list of ghost stories that are not only deeply chilling, but masterfully written. There's no vampires, no zombies, no monsters. These are pure, chilling ghost stories. These are my top 10 books that are actually quite scary, and importantly, stories that stay with you, haunt you, long after the last page. Let's begin. The first book on my list is The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson. Shirley Jackson's masterpiece centers on the character called Eleanor Vance, a lonely, emotionally fragile woman who joins an investigation of the infamous Hill House, a structure long rumored to be haunted. Alongside a small team, including the mysterious Theodora and the pragmatic Luke, Eleanor begins to experience increasingly strange events. Unexplained banging on the walls, disembodied voices, cold drafts, and messages written in a childlike scrawl that call her by her name. Hill House is no ordinary haunted mansion. It possesses an insidious intelligence. Rather than frightening its visitors in overt ways, it seems to find and exploit their deepest psychological weaknesses. For Eleanor, who has spent her life craving love, belonging, and identity, the house becomes both a tormentor and a seducer. Her growing instability leads to a tragic end when she crashes her car into a tree, possibly at the house's bidding. What makes this novel terrifying is its psychological ambiguity. Is Hill House truly haunted, or is Eleanor mentally ill? Jackson masterfully blurs the line between the supernatural and the psychological. The horror is not just in what is seen or heard, but in the unraveling of a fragile mind, manipulated by a house that might be sentient. Shirley Jackson's masterful storytelling is also present in a lot of her other works, of course, one being We Have Always Lived in the Castle, which also has an ambiguity to the storytelling and a sense that something is not quite right in the story, that we can't quite trust the narrator, and maybe there's something a little bit more going on beneath the surface of the story. But my next pick is The Woman in Black by Susan Hill. Definitely recommend this book to all horror fans. In this modern Gothic tale, Arthur Kipps, a young solicitor, is dispatched to handle the estate of the late Mrs. Drablow. He travels to the isolated and fog-shrouded Eel Marsh house, which sits on a marshland only accessible by a causeway that vanishes at high tide. While there, Kipps begins to witness strange occurrences and glimpses of a woman in black, whose presence causes terror among the locals. As Kipps investigates, he learns the house is haunted by Janet Humphrey, a woman who lost her son in a tragic accident after he was taken from her by legal guardians. Her spirit is driven not by malice, but by unbearable grief. However, her manifestations have horrifying consequences. Every time the ghost appears, a child in the town dies. Hill's horror is understated and atmospheric, rooted in dread and inevitability. The reader, like Kipps, comes to understand that logic and justice have no place in the ghost's world. The woman in black doesn't care who is innocent. Her vengeance is boundless, echoing the inescapability of grief and loss. My next choice is a collection of ghost stories in a book called Kwaidan, Stories and Studies of Strange Things, translated from Japanese by Lafcadio Hearn. This collection of Japanese ghost stories blends folklore, surrealism, and the macabre. Among the most famous tales is Hoichi the Earless, in which a blind biwa player, which I think is like a flute, is tricked into performing for ghostly samurai, unaware that they are dead. To protect him, Buddhist monks write sacred texts on his body, but forget his ears. When the ghosts return, they tear them off. Another chilling story is Mujina, involving a man who encounters a weeping woman on a dark road. Now, when she finally turns to face him, she has no face at all. Later, a cab driver reveals himself to be another faceless entity. Hearn's stories disturb with dreamlike detachment. The horror often emerges from silence, from what isn't said or seen. These tales embody ancient fears of honor, shame, and the afterlife. while tapping into modern anxieties about identity, isolation, and the unknowable. My next pick is called The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, published in 2009. This is set in post-World War II England. The novel follows Dr. Faraday, a country physician who becomes entangled with the Arras family, the decaying aristocrats of Hundreds Hall. As Faraday visits the crumbling estate more frequently, strange occurrences begin. Unexplained fires, violent outbursts, and signs that the house itself is alive and malevolent. Roderick Arras, the war-wounded heir, believes something inside the house is trying to destroy him. As the plot unfolds, the line between psychological illness and supernatural haunting becomes increasingly blurred. Faraday, the rational outsider, may in fact be the ghost, or at least a malevolent force of change. The book works on many layers, exploring themes of class, repression, and the illusion of rationality. The true horror lies in the collapse of old social orders and the denial of one's role in that destruction. Now, in my opinion, like all great horror stories, there is always a bit of ambiguity to the ending. Waters never gives a definitive answer as to whether the haunting is real, making the novel a sophisticated meditation on envy, decay, and self-deception. The house may be haunted, or it may simply reflect the subconscious rot of those who live within it. My next pick is The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. In the story, Elsie Bainbridge, newly widowed, travels to her late husband's ancestral home, only to find it riddled with secrets. Among the cobwebs and decay, she discovers silent companions, life-sized wooden figures that are eerily lifelike. As her stay continues, she finds that they move on their own, change their expressions, and begin to resemble her. Intertwined with Elsie's narrative is a 17th century diary chronicling an ancestor's dealings with witchcraft and betrayal. The companions are rooted in this ancestral curse, and the house becomes a place of escalating terror. The blurring of perception and reality plays a key role in this story again. Is Elsie truly being haunted, or is she descending into madness? Purcell channels the Gothic tradition with chilling precision. The silent companions themselves embody the uncanny, the almost human made monstrous. The novel explores themes of madness, female agency, and the psychological imprisonment of grief and isolation. I've read these short stories many times. These are the ghost stories by M.R. James. This is a very treasured book of mine. M.R. James, a Cambridge scholar, pioneered the English ghost story by combining academic settings with otherworldly terrors. There's a few very famous stories in this book, one being "Oh Whistle and I'll Come to You, My Lad," where a professor discovers a whistle among Templar ruins. When he blows it, he summons a terrifying presence. One night, his bedclothes rise on their own, forming a humanoid figure beneath the sheets. It also includes the famous story "A Warning to the Curious," where a man unearths an ancient crown buried to protect England from invaders. His act of curiosity invites a spectral guardian who pursues him with increasing intensity, ending in his death. James's work is chilling because it suggests a moral universe without redemption.
He was never there when I looked straight at him. I would lie down for quite a long time, take careful observations, and make sure there was no one. And then when I got up and began prospecting again, there he was.
Transgression brings punishment, and there is no priest or hero or ritual that can save you. His ghosts are not vengeful spirits, but cosmic reminders that some knowledge was never meant to be uncovered. My next pick is another book that all book lovers should read. It is Beloved by Toni Morrison. Set in the aftermath of the American Civil War, Morrison's novel tells the story of Seth, a former slave haunted by the ghost of her daughter. Seth lives in a house with her surviving daughter, Denver, and the house is filled with violent, unexplained phenomena. One day, a mysterious young woman named Beloved arrives. Seth becomes convinced she is the reincarnation of her lost child. Beloved is not merely a ghost story, but also an exploration on the trauma of slavery, guilt, and memory. Seth's desperate act to kill her own daughter rather than allow her to be recaptured is the emotional and moral core of the book. Beloved's haunting is both literal and psychological. The novel's horror lies in the emotional intensity. The supernatural is not a break from reality, but its extension. Morrison forces the readers to confront the enduring scars of slavery and the way that the past devours the present. My next pick is The Turn of the Screw by Henry James. In this story, a governess is hired to care for two children, Miles and Flora, at a remote county estate. Soon she begins seeing the ghosts of former servants, Peter Quint and Miss Jessel. She becomes obsessed with protecting the children from these apparitions, which may or may not be real. The story is told through the governess's account, and James intentionally leaves her reliability in question. Are the ghosts real? Are the children complicit in some sinister plan? Or is the governess succumbing to her own repressed desires and fears? The genius of this novella is in its ambiguity. Again, an important device used, I think, in brilliant ghost stories. Horror arises from uncertainty and implication. It's a story about innocence corrupted, sexual repression, and the destructive power of delusion. I imagine there would be some uproar if I did not include this particular author in my list. That is, of course, Stephen King, and the book is The Shining. In the story, Jack Torrance, a struggling writer and recovering alcoholic, accepts a job as the winter caretaker of the Overlook Hotel, a sprawling and isolated resort in Colorado. He moves there with his wife, Wendy, and his young son, Danny, who has psychic abilities. As winter progresses, Jack begins to fall under the malevolent influence of the hotel, and his mental state deteriorates, fueled by the hotel's dark past and supernatural forces. The horror of The Shining lies in its exploration of madness, familial violence, and isolation. The hotel is not only haunted by ghosts, but by the ghosts of its violent history, which begin to manipulate Jack. Danny's psychic abilities also open him up to the hotel's terrors, making his experiences all the more horrifying. King masterfully combines psychological horror with supernatural terror, creating a narrative where the true threat may be not just the hotel, but Jack's own mind unraveling. My next pick is the short story The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins. In this haunting psychological novella, the narrator, a woman suffering from postpartum depression, is confined to a room in a secluded mansion by her husband, a physician. As she spends more time in the room, she becomes obsessed with the yellow wallpaper, believing she sees a woman trapped within it. As the narrator's mental state deteriorates, she becomes increasingly convinced that she must free the woman, leading to a terrifying and tragic climax. The story is a powerful exploration of mental illness, oppression, and the consequences of isolation. The wallpaper becomes a metaphor for the narrator's confinement, both physically in the room and emotionally in her marriage and societal expectations. The true horror lies in the unraveling of the narrator's mind and the suffocating forces that trap her. I also wanted to use this video to mention a fantastic book called Ghosts of the Tsunami by Richard Lloyd Parry. This is actually a non-fiction work that examines the 2011 Japanese tsunami that claimed over 18,000 lives. Parry spent 6 years interviewing survivors and families, particularly in the Tohoku region. The most harrowing accounts come from Okawa Elementary School, where 74 children died after poor evacuation decisions. In the aftermath of the tsunami, many locals then reported ghostly encounters, taxis that picked up passengers who vanished mid-ride, children speaking of classmates returning from the dead, and widespread requests for Buddhist exorcisms. These were not being dismissed as superstition, but treated as expressions of trauma and collective mourning. It is very rare for a book to actually shock me, and rarer still for a book to make me cry, but this one did both many times. This book will make you angry at the choices made by the staff at the school, and the descriptions of what the people feel and what they saw are so vivid that they paint such nightmarish images in your mind that will stick with you for a long time. It is truly heartbreaking, horrific, supernatural, and incredibly chilling. The book, of course, is not a ghost story in the traditional sense, but a powerful reminder that true horror often lies in reality. The supernatural elements serve as cultural and emotional responses to grief, memory, and the human need for closure in the face of unimaginable loss. So those are my picks of the best ghost stories. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Bye bye.